Good morning, and welcome to Real Human Design Stories, where we share real-life stories of how human design has helped our guests know themselves on a deep, transformative level. Whether you're joining us live here during Sunday Story Hour in my Facebook group, or catching this on your favorite podcast platform on Mondays, you'll be able to find all the details you need in the show notes or the Facebook comments. Human design helps us to differentiate between what is ours and what is conditioning. By knowing and trusting ourselves, we develop deeper, more honest relationships and unlock our true gifts. I'm Kathy Bashanko, and my guest this week is Roger Campbell, a 3-5 reflector, and he's right angle cross of rulership. So I'm really excited to talk to another reflector. I have a high ratio of reflectors, I think, because you're my third reflector I've gotten to talk to already on episode 47, which I guess is your conscious son, right? So I'm excited. Welcome, Roger. And if I'd love for you to just say hi and get right into how all this stuff found you and your surprise of finding you're a reflector.
It's been a long path. I didn't meet design until well into my journey, honestly. I started like many people do, I think, having challenges and dilemmas in relationships. And that pushed me to look inside quite a bit. And we're talking probably 2008, 2009, roughly, maybe where I really started to get into the meat of things, reading Eckhart Tolle, which was a hugely impactful book for me. Speaking of The Power of Now, if you're familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
I read the first chapter of that book right when it came out. I think it was around 08, maybe. Could have been as early as 05. I'm terrible with dates, by the way. Right brain. But what stuck with me, Kathy, was the concept of inner observer. So that's really where everything started for me. To know that there was a duality to my consciousness, and to hear that from Eckhart if you know the book, you know the story. He was feeling rather despondent, laid up one night, thinking in his head. And all of a sudden he stops and says, wait a minute, I'm having a conversation in my head. Who are these two entities? And boom, he had this incredible realization, gate 47, by the way. That impacted me in a way that is pretty easy to articulate if you've ever had sea legs. It was like my inner ear was impacted. And I felt like I was alone in a rowboat in the middle of an ocean and all by myself. It wasn't a negative experience. It was just an understanding that I am a consciousness out here having an experience and there's nothing around. And it was very profound for me. So,
yeah. So what year would you say that was?
Sometime in 05 to 08. It was right around the time when the book was published. I'm terrible with dates and I don't have a lot attachment to it, so forgive me with my dates.
That's okay.
So really that it really kickstarted my journey. I ended up getting a coach for relationships. She was rather impactful, to put it. She was very brash, very Irish, and she was beautiful for me. She was a holistic body worker, and I started my work in emotional intelligence and learning how to understand relationships, all the things that men don't typically get when we're growing up, taught how to, feel things and to not react to things. So that was really the beginning of my journey. So I spent several years doing that. And you may have heard of a lady by the name of Alison Armstrong. She wrote a book called The Queen's Code. You ever heard of it?
I think I've heard of it, but I have not read it.
She runs a program called PAX, and she has two programs, Understanding Men and Understanding Women. And really what it's all about is instinctual behavior as expressed inside the container of relationships.
So PAX as in like PACKS.
PAX is the name of her.
PAX. Okay.
Understanding Men, Understanding Women. And I was not only a student, I was on the edge of certifying. I'd become quite, vocal in the groups. And it's really beautiful stuff. It's all these conditioned in the lens of human design, preferential behaviors that over time we have evolved to keep with us. So it's really preferred conditioning, and it's quite beautiful. But the primary things that drive male and female behavior. Men, respect. And women, it's safety and security. Now, these aren't absolutes, Kathy. They're spectrums, and everybody embodies them differently.
Sure.
But what a key to be able to see how relationships work, and how one of Alison's taglines that I really has stuck with me over the years is, what if none of us was ever really misbehaving? We're just misunderstood in how we're trying to get our needs met.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we really take that apart, isn't that a lot of what interpersonal relationships are? It's just misunderstandings.
Sure.
Both
Yeah.
from on our side and their side. We just don't understand each other very well. And I thought that was a really powerful education in that way. So I probably spent about 4 or 5 years doing that type of work before I ever met design. I was working with men for the most part, educating guys on emotional awareness, how to handle high conflict partners, which is something I do quite a bit of, I have experience as a 3-5, let's put it that way, in my own life of some high conflict people. But I've learned how to navigate that with some grace and with compassion for the other people
Mm-hmm.
as well as myself. And really, that came down to boundaries. Something reflectors do struggle with is boundaries. You might hear that. So that was really the start of my journey. It was about 5 or 6 years in where one of my friends, she's a Mayan intuitive, actually. She lives up in Sedona. She offered to do a reading for me. And I said, great. And so she did this whole astrological reading with all the stelliums in my chart and this and that, as well as the Mayan glyphs. On the very last page was a little body graph for a reflector. And the experience I had was, I got to the end and I said, what's that? And I don't like to say that I found human design. It found me in that moment. As I started to read some of the keynotes of a reflector, I went, yep, that, and that. And it stuck with me right away. And it seemed to start answering some deep inner questions I had about how I function and operate. So you can kind of see a theme starting to emerge that this has been a quest to understand myself. All of my personal work started with relationships, moved into what am I doing wrong here? What is it about me? Why am I not getting this to work? It just doesn't make any sense. I give such great advice to other people. Never seems to work for me. Well, sure enough, I found out I was a reflector, and that's really where things started to unfold for me. That was probably roughly 2010 or 11. I don't remember. I'd have to look at my records. I don't stress about it very much.
Yeah.
But,
So about 13, 14 years ago.
Yeah.
So
my second
2 cycles in. You're getting to the end of the second cycle, huh? The 7th cycle.
I'm getting near my Saturn return. My next, the second one. I'm 55.
Oh,
55.
okay.
Looking forward to that, actually.
Yeah, I just had mine. Was it last year? No, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, yeah, because I always talk about how my second Saturn return kind of brought me back to my knees again and said, mine is in gate 13, Saturn. So it really was like, what are the stories you're telling about yourself and others, right? Yeah. So anyway, and yours is what? Yours is 24 and 27. So 24 is the gate of rationalization, right? I mean, there's so many names. It's funny because my sister's always like, I hate when you throw around the numbers. And I was like, that's because there's so many names. I never know which one they use. So I just say the number. But gate 24, what do you refer to it as?
Oh, that's gate of, I have to look at my chart. I'm gonna cheat.
Yeah, you have it on set. Your Saturn is gate 24. And I know it's all about going inward and so
my personality. I'm always looking at my design.
Okay.
The cinema. Yeah, it's one of the constraints.
Gate of constraint. Yeah, that's what it's sometimes called. And then 27 is all about nurturing. And
7 is one of my favorite gates. I have it twice in line 4, which is generosity.
Yeah.
That is this is more on the traditional side of human design, but when we look at the magic square, both of those are on my external expression side. So everything that comes out of me
Okay, you're already talking above the heads of most of the audience, so you might need to explain a lot of what you just said. Like magic square, a lot of people are not
Yeah.
gonna know what that
Well,
means.
there are ways to see the alignments of some of the gates and to say, oh, this is my external expression. This is some of the deeper mechanics that are in design. But for me, it's correct, or it's in alignment for me is another way to say that. For me to be generous. Rulership cross. If you really think about the rulership cross, we're here to educate people in our tribe or in our fractal, and to be the generous distributor of resources. So it really is quite a nice not dilemma in my chart, right? So there's really some beautiful symmetry, I think, in places in our
Yeah,
charts. Look at it. For
right.
sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So that
Anyway, back to your story. So you were telling me about, or telling us all about your finding out that you're a reflector, and your feeling was one of surprise rather than disappointment at that news.
Yeah. And it also made it challenging for me because I met human design as an embodied observer. Now, I think that many in your audience are going to relate to that, especially on the QHD side of the fence, right? Because there's a lot of what I would call pretty leveled up people in QHD, at least in the awareness side of things, emotionally, and so on and so on. But from my current frame of perspective, it made it challenging for me to surrender the I am of my mind, my personality, the I am that is me, billions of years old, the consciousness that's inhabiting this vehicle. Philosophical belief I have is that I'm a non-interfering passenger watching my life unfold, not interfering with my mental activity. And I think that might be some of the split between traditional and QHD.
Go back to exactly how you said that. Not interfering with your mental activity could be interpreted two different ways. So can you explain what you mean by that specifically?
Yes. The personality crystal itself is not inside the vehicle. I think that, that's a pretty standard teaching.
Here, right.
Well, as such, does it have, I'm posing the question to myself internally, does it truly have authority to make decisions in the life or to initiate action? Because I'm non-sacral, right? I believe the answer to that question to me is no. I'm here to be an observer, a witness to the experience, and to just allow things to unfold in that way. And that's the experiment I've engaged in over the last 5 to 7 years, somewhere in that range. Somewhere at the end of my first cycle, I really started to try to let go of letting my mind guide me. I'm a pretty smart guy, and I've been a manifestor all my life, right? In behavior, I make things happen. But I began to notice that as I took my hands off the wheel and just allowed life to happen without an agenda, without an expectation, all these wonderful opportunities started to present themselves to me. So it's more of a non-attachment.
Yeah.
Way. So that's how I saw things beginning to unfold for me somewhere in my second cycle. But I feel like I want to back up, Kathy. I want to talk about my experience when I first met design as an observer, because I really think it's important for those in traditional human design to hear this experience. When I first met design, I ran straight into what I call the correctness cops. You can't do this. You can't do that. There is no choice in this life. It was so brash. It was so in your face, and it felt judgmental to me as a 47-3. I didn't like it. I really didn't. I enjoyed Ra. I enjoyed what he had to say, but some of the people actually pushed me right out, and I didn't want anything to do with it. So I was very cavalier with my strategy and authority and did self-study for quite some time. And then I meandered into, I think, some of Karen Parker's stuff, and I believe that was through Marla Mack. What a lovely person. I enjoy her very much. Her post, she's great.
She's been on, and maybe in the show notes, I'll put a link to the episode with her if anyone's curious, or something I'll put in the comments if you haven't heard. It was a great conversation.
So I had an experience with QHD, and I believe I went to one of the shows, or virtually I attended in 2020. And I executed with, levels 1 through 4. And I believe I finished 1 and 2. I got to 3 and I started really looking for content that mattered to me. So level 3, we were starting to get into circuits. And I said, okay, this is good stuff. But I was wondering where the rest of it was. Where's the PHS? I want to know about this. My 47 wanting to know why, that little 5-year-old boy, right, Kathy, that I mentioned yesterday. Why? Where's this? Where's that? Where's the other thing? Well, I started to get my hands on some of the content, and I started to read the 4 transformations, which is all about that first level beneath the surface where we start to get into PHS. We're talking about the tones and the colors, and that gets into our cognition, how we see. Very important topic for a reflector, how we see. So for me, that's what really pulled me. It's not that I left QHD. It's that I was pulled into some of the deeper knowledge that's really there in the mechanics of the Maya. And that is what started to light me up in a very, very big way. Probably about 7 years ago, roughly. In that neighborhood, I think it was 2020 when I was in QHD. Maybe it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It's hard to remember. But it was quite an experience to start reading things about my incarnation cross, for example. I started to read Ra talking about the 3-5 right angle cross of rulership, and the words, they hit me right in the face. It says, and then unfortunately we get to the 3-5.
Oh God.
And he goes into this whole diatribe, and I lived every bit of that. And what he was saying was that these are the kind of people that would take, when faced with a difficult or challenging situation, they might take the thing that they love the most dearly and smash it into 1,000 pieces. And I went, that's me. That is absolutely me. I've done this. I've lived this. But it's also nice to see the other side of the thing, because everything is a polarity. So I started getting deeper and deeper into the mechanics of things and starting to really see how I was operating on a deeper level. And that's how I experienced the pull back into more of the traditional perspective of design for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. And it's interesting because I had a very similar path in the fact that, excuse me, we don't have a motor to the throat, I guess. What?
I have the 45 to 21 and the 36. Oh
yeah, we do have that act, and you and I connect to the 45-21. So I guess I can't blame it on that. So when I started with human design, I was doing the self-study with Ra, and I got really turned off by that same policing kind of environment, moved into quantum human design, but have also felt that with that quantum human design perspective now, and that understanding of the higher frequency of things, I can read this stuff from Ra without it just sucking me down. Because there's a lot, the way that Ra writes, if you're in a low vibration already, it's not necessarily empowering and uplifting. For, some people need to see themselves enough in that low expression to say, oh, that is me. And oh, maybe there is something more for it. But a lot of people get stuck in that. I mean, so many people get stuck in well, I can't because I'm a whatever. And so I feel like that whole, it's kind of almost like coming home again. And so I really feel like it's this circle, you start here and then you have to go around into something different. And then you can come back and see that first thing in a different light, and then come back into quantum human design with a different light, and then go back into traditional. And I really see that there is something to be gained in all these multiple perspectives. And especially with my completely open ajna, I can hold space for all these truths in a way that feels really expansive,
Yeah, I think one of the things that does stick with me, though, is that I am not here to initiate as a non-sacral being. And I have found that over and over in my life that the minute I start to especially initiate something for me or something that I think I want, doesn't really turn out as well. But if somebody asks me to do something or initiates me into it, my goodness, does that seem to turn out correctly? Or everything seems to the stars seem to align, things seem to work properly. So that's how my experience has been with manifesting per se. I can't initiate. So I almost don't like to say the word can't, you're right.
Yeah.
It almost sticks in my craw.
Yeah. You choose not to. That's right.
Well, I don't know that it's choosing. Maybe it could be. Maybe it's trying to keep it trying. There's another word. It's another way to say it. It's more of a surrendered state. It's more of a, well, you look at that, how did that just happen? And then you get to kind of look at it and take it apart. And then I get to respond to life rather than initiate the action. I might be talking open head. So sometimes hard to distill that down into a practical concept. Do you have the 43? No, you don't, do you?
Nope.
I have the 23. I'm always seeking that 43. That would be great.
Well, I actually I think it was Ankara Rose that when she was checking out her success codex, she looks at some other placements. And I have, I want to say it's either my ascending or my midheaven or something like that. It's like some other key astrological points are in that 43. I have a couple of them. And I know that doesn't give me definition, but I definitely have it. And I'm very conditioned by the 43-23 because they seem to be everywhere in my life. So they're, it's clearly, and I say that in the sense of, I don't think all conditioning is bad. It's how we gain that wisdom in our openness, right? So I have gained a lot of conditioning to help me have wisdom in that 43-23 from my sister and my friend Nancy and other people who carry that energy. So
conditioning is life.
Yeah.
Experience is conditioning. I mean, we're the day I'm not getting conditioned is the day I'm dead.
Right.
We're here to live life and experience our openness. We're not here to stamp it out like it's some kind of a bad thing,
Right.
I firmly that our openness is the classroom of our life.
Yes.
It's where we experience the other. It's where we meet the other. So I love the 23. I have a name for it. You might like it. I call it the universal translator.
Okay.
It's this way of taking complicated things and just spitting out the essence of it. And it's my design mode, and I really like it. But I always love having 43s around. They really help me to articulate things.
Yeah.
So yeah. Where was I in my story? I was talking about, just sort of gravitating away, perhaps about QHD.
Well, you kind of went one way and then you kind of came back. So I'm not sure where you feel you want to take it up again.
Well, I'd love to start talking about reflectors and how challenging it can be as a reflector, whether you're in QHD or human design, to meet this knowledge. I mean, it's really
I got to tell someone they were a reflector in person yesterday at this event that I'm doing. The very first person who I did a reading with yesterday, I was doing these little mini readings at a psychic fair, and I'll be there later today too. And I ran her chart and I got to tell her that she's this rare type. And it really, like you could tell she was someone already on her path, and so it all was just like, oh, that makes so much sense, And so, that was cool.
Yes, I can see it. And you also get to taste the impact it had. That must have been lovely.
Yeah.
I love reflect.
And she had that hanging gate 47, like you have, that connects with my 64. So we felt that, that had an ajna connection in there, so that
it's a chart. I mean, I have 47 in my personality sun. It's also my self node personality side, and it's also my moon. So if you really think about that, all three of those bodies were lined up in a row. It's an eclipse. You can actually see the astrological alignment.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I was born during a ring of fire eclipse.
Wow.
And that's how these stelliums happen. Now, if you would notice, I'm a 47-3 sun. If I was born at the peak, I would have been a 47-3 moon. But I'm not. I'm a 5. I was born a little off of totality, but yeah, that's what really has given me. I have 4 of them. It's also my Pluto in line 7 on design 7.
Okay, so we keep saying the number 47, and you and I know. So tell everybody, because this is clearly a big part of who you are, and it's whenever we have a hanging gate on an open center, it really flavors the experiences we have in that center. So what does the 47 mean to you in
traditional, they use the word oppression, and it certainly can be that, but I vastly prefer to call it the gate of realizations.
Yeah.
I don't know what Karen calls it. I would love to remember. I have her codex. I could look it up. It's probably along that theme of realization or of understanding, perhaps. But
mindset, the gate of mindset.
Yeah, and that's how appropriate, because I absolutely love to talk about mindset and having a mindset of the present moment. I'll get into that. But that's the 47. It's the gate of realizing things. And I jokingly messaged you yesterday. Having 4 of them is like having 10 5-year-old boys inside my head, constantly asking why, who, how, what, where, when. Because when we think about what that is, that's the abstract channel. It's through the solar plexus. It's about experiencing life. It's about processing experiences in the past.
That's not going to make sense to most people when you say it's through the solar plexus, because the channel is in the head and the ajna. So can you?
The entire abstract circuit, and I believe Karen has a different name for abstract. That lives entirely on the solar plexus. So there is no truth in the now for anything that happens on the abstract circuit. That's what I mean by that. It runs through the solar plexus wave. Right. So you have to process the experience to truly understand it, is a good way to articulate.
When you just know stuff in your body, it's there's this, I think she calls it this, somebody, is that part of the sensing circuit, or is that, no, that's what she calls the logic. There's so many names. I get the feeling of it. I always have to look up I always say my head is so full of stuff to try to find it when I need it,
Yeah, I think I do believe that's sensing. I'm open to be corrected on that, but yeah, that's part of the senses. It's part of if you're in the school of thought of the rave mutation for 2027, which I certainly don't want to get into.
Right.
That's also happening on the solar plexus binary. It's really part of who I am. I'm very abstract in that sense. I carry a lot of those sensing gates in my design. So every lunar cycle, I go through a lot of those channels. So it's about experience. It's perfect for me, though. You think about it, I'm a third line being. I'm here to try things. I'm here to experiment. I'm here to push the envelope a little bit. So being on that abstract experience really fits for me. So
and bring it to the world through the 5th line: visionary leadership, heretical savior, all this stuff. Just, speak in your mind, right?
What's it called? Called explorer. Karen has a different name than I don't really like martyr heretic so much. I mean, it's the negative side of it, right?
Yeah, well, she calls the 3rd line the experimenter, I believe. I usually refer to it as experiential learner. And then the 5th line is the visionary leader. But,
yes.
It's funny because my sister is a 5-2, and I always say, a lot of people don't like the word heretic. And she's like, I love being a heretic. She owns that, right?
I like stirring the pot,
Right.
I mean, it's my nodes, and I have 3 gate 6s that are hanging. I think
that's awesome. I have 3 gate 59s that connect with your 3 gate 6s then to form that channel of intimacy, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think some of the best, I used to have a saying a long time ago, conflict is like rocket fuel for personal growth. It can be, if you have the right mindset about it.
Yeah, when you don't take conflict as a personal assault or something that's yours to manage, and you can be with it and experience it without feeling defined by it, it can make a huge difference, right?
Yeah. So back to the 47 and what I was talking about. So you have all these 5-year-old boys wanting to know why, running around in my head. Really, it's about attaching or letting go of the attachment to the why. Have you ever had the experience, Kathy, where you've had something that's been bothering you and you keep trying to think about it, and for some reason the answer just will not come? Well, you just put it down and you go off and maybe you're doing the dishes or maybe you're out riding your bicycle, having fun. You notice that the mailbox has something about it. And all of a sudden that fuels the inspiration that brings a realization to your problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because you would let go of the why, the answer came to you. That's really how I see a realization. And they come to us. We can never think a realization with concerted mental energy. It doesn't work like that. They're almost like gifts from above, serendipity, so to speak.
Yeah, and we
That's how
limit ourselves when we try to get the answer from our mind. And so I often will ask a question, and then like there are certain people in my life that get mad because I'll ask a question and then I dissuade every answer they give me because I'm like, I don't really want an answer. This is just a question I'm putting out there, and I don't necessarily say that, but I've had people in my past that would be like, I don't know why you ask because you don't listen to anything anybody tells you. And I'm like, yeah, because that's not what I wanted. I'm just like, I'm very much, isn't that interesting? Because I have the other end. I have the 64, which is all about asking the actual questions, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't need the answer. I just need the question. And once I have the question, I'm happy and I'm love to give people questions, right? So,
Well,
yeah.
I love questions. I love having things pulled out of me. So that's really how I see the 47. It's really the secret to it is to just let it go, almost like the girl in Frozen. Just let it go.
Yeah.
Or if you listen to some of Ra's older lectures on the 47, you can actually hear it in his frequency. And I don't want to use, he will actually use an F-bomb. He would say something to the effect of, and these flipping people, the trip that they lay on themselves as Gate 47s, having to know the answers, having to know the why, you can internally oppress yourself into mental health issues. Sinead O'Connor, she had something like 347s, and everybody, when they were picking her chart apart, when she was, when she had just committed suicide, I believe it was, they were pointing at the 47 and blaming it. It's got such a reputation in design. It's almost really, like, oh, you have a 47. I'm so sorry.
It's really, that's a thing I see a lot in traditional human design that I don't see in so much in quantum human design. But the idea that there is something in your chart that's bad, and there's everything. There are bad expressions of everything. There's bad expressions of the money line, but everybody's like, "Ooh, I got the money line." Well, you know what? I have been around some people with the money line where it feels so awful to be in their energy. So, like, it's really everything's a binary. It's a polarity, or it's not even. I don't know. There's a whole spectrum is really probably more realistic way to say it, right? So, and just always looking at how can I be a little bit higher expression than I have been when you can recognize yourself in the lower expression of something.
Yeah, I think a lot of it can be language too. It's almost like you hear the word correctness. Sometimes that can even make me cringe when used in context.
Yeah.
Really, it can mean alignment if you want to read it. It's about seeing what the person's trying to say sometimes, and being a little more accepting. But yeah, that's the 47 to me. I mean, even the 47 itself, if you look at what Ra writes about the 47.6, that keynote is called futility. There is no exalt here, is what he writes. Bullshit. There's an exalt. It's called surrender.
Yeah.
What do you do when you're faced with futility? There's such a beautiful feeling to be able to let go of things. And that's what I'm trying to articulate with the 47. It's about letting go of the expectation of answers. We're not here for answers. We're here for experiences.
So would you say that that's Gate 47 has been your biggest, I don't know, I don't want to say struggle because I really don't like to use your biggest learning point in the chart, or is there a certain, no?
The thing I'm really getting into at this time is the nodes. And now, as I recall in QHD, it's about from where you left in life and to where you're going. Could you educate me if there's anything further about the nodes in
Well,
QH?
she doesn't teach about environment and that sort of thing. So, and I believe totally in the idea of our nodes being our environment, and I believe about the environment. So I really do blend. That's why I don't call myself QHD. I am certified in QHD, but I am self-taught pretty extensively in traditional human design as well. And the only reason that I say self-taught is because I don't want the rules that go with IHDS certification. I have to, you basically have to do things in a way that just doesn't feel in alignment and recognition of my.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But the nodes are taught, she teaches, if I'm, I don't want to oversimplify it, but that the south nodes are the early lessons and the things we kind of come in already starting with that energy, and we're there until the Uranus opposition moves us into the energies that we're here to bring forth, master, grow into in the lessons of the north nodes. And
it's very accurate, but what I wanted to add to that is there are some things that I have personally experienced in my observations. One of the teachings is that our personality nodes, for example, I have 4722. That's harmonia in the 47. So you have the gate of grace or lack of grace, and then you have realizations or oppression. And that's in the Godhead of harmonia. So I'm all about seeing into relationships. Who's into who? Who doesn't like who? Who may be good together, who's not good together. I really have no choice. It's almost like that dog in the movie Up, where he sees squirrel. I mean, if I see relationship issues or I can't help it. It grabs, right. There's a frequency in it that grabs my attention. And I think for all of us, if we really look at our personality nodes and the keynotes, we might be able to grab onto a few keynotes to say, oh yeah, that kind of frequency certainly grabs my attention. And that's one of the truths that I've found in the nodes is that, they really are points on a map. They're not even real things. When we think about it, it's a little point out in space over here, and it's a little point in space out over here. So it's about our trajectory in life, and it's about our direction, just as Karen teaches, but it's also about how we see. We were imprinted with a certain frequency that is part of our purpose. And for me, that happens to be able to see into relationships somehow. So that's really one of the things that I've started to gravitate towards in human design is looking at the nodes and how they connect to how we each uniquely see things. There are 32 pairs, right? Mm-hmm. 32 sets of nodes. Everybody sees differently. No, I'm not going to waste my time trying to get you to see the way I see. I would much rather hear you talk about how you see through that. The 58, was it you have? I think you have.
I have the 53, 54 and the 39, 38, and I'm not even remembering if I'm saying them in the right order now because
38, 39 is your person.
There you go. That's the right. I said it in
the fighter. So you see the struggle that's
I call it my 1-2 punch.
Yeah. And it's not that it upsets you, but you're just kind of pulled into it. And it just, for each of us, if we really spend some time and investigate those keynotes of our nodes, maybe we got a little something that I'm going to use to grab onto. And for a reflector, to have something to hold on to, like how I see, I don't have any definition, Kathy. So there's one point of stability that I have is how I see.
And your view, the perspective for you is the view of it is power. And I can totally see that in you. And it's interesting when, and that's getting into some pretty, more obscure things that a lot of people don't look at, but I've been looking at that a lot recently. And, one of the things, the deeper I get into all this, I realize if I'm going to honor my energy as it's here, as I came here to be, and really observe how all that works out, I have to do the same for people around me, allow them to be who they are. And so as we start to look at our relationships, and we look at our perspective, the view we have of the world, my view is want, need, right? I look at what other people want and need in order to be happy, successful, which, really serves me well as a mentor and a mother and a wife. We're always thinking about what other people need, right? But it can also really be frustrating. My husband has the exact opposite. He's survival. And so anytime I start wanting him to, like, we can easily flip each other into that so much. And, so knowing that, and then our daughter, who's 23, she has a view of her perspective is possibility. And, she's meant to see the possibilities in life. And my husband sees, how's this going to affect my survival? How much money is this going to cost me, right? How much stress is this going to be for me if she tries to go after these dreams, right? And then I just want her to be happy and successful. And I want him, and so it gets into this whole thing when I can see all that. And it's been a really interesting thing to observe things and not try to get the answer, because then I did this thing where I would get in my head trying to figure this out. So now I've switched back to that questioning, like you talked about, where I said, well, isn't it interesting? I can see this. And now I'm just going to watch this with this question in my mind of like, oh, so how is that playing out? Let's watch this, right? And that's been really an interesting way to approach things for me. So
being a good observer is what I just heard. Yeah, and that's really it for me. It's being a good non-reactive observer. I mean, imagine, Kathy, I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in Boston. So the town I grew up in was probably 50-50, half Italian, half Irish. Talk about a lot of emotional energy and spirited conversations, and quite frankly, reactivity.
Yeah.
I had to unlearn all that stuff to be a good observer of my experience and not just blurt out the first thing that my hurt emotions wanted to say. It's just kind of hold space to let things land. I love to say that, to let things land for a minute and feel the energy of it and then respond to life rather than react to it. That's a beautiful way to say it.
Yeah. And so, and that really seems to relate to I noticed you have the Hanging Gate 20, which is about being present in the moment, and that feels like, and that's your design Mercury. So that feels interesting too.
Oh, it's very important for a reflector. I mean, one of the most practical things that still boggles my mind to this day about reflectors, we have a signature, much like your bitterness to success, we have disappointment to surprise. One thing really adds a lot of gravity to a reflector signature: expectations. So if I look at myself and my mental energy is looking down the road, trying to make plan after plan, I'm creating expectations and planting seeds that could open up and swallow me up at any point as disappointment. So with that 20, as you say, it's really a great mindset, gate 47, to be in the present moment for me. And how can I not have wonder at life to be right here? I have few expectations. I'm getting surprised all the time.
Yeah.
And not attached surrender to life. So maybe that's my perspective as a reflector on gate 47. I'm not here to interfere. I'm here to just see and to tell people what I see when I'm asked. That's how I really approach it.
Since most of us have very limited experience with reflectors, you're such a rare percentage of the thing. And I'm looking at your chart. And for those who aren't looking at it, Roger has the root center completely undefined, no gates activated at all. And none of the gates on any of the opposing or like connecting centers are defined except for gate 9 on the sacral points down to it. And that's all about focus.
Right.
So I'm wondering though, like that feeling. So I feel like in some ways, maybe because there's not hanging gates, there's not as much of a likelihood for you to connect to other people's, like, whereas, somebody who has an undefined root with a lot of activations, they might feel that pressure more often as it connects with other people. But you have also got that undefined head. So the pressure to answer those questions for those 4 or 5 5-year-old boys, And the pressure to do everything to get it all done, is there. But I'm wondering how, as a reflector, that kind of pressure might feel different. And I know you only know how it feels for you, but just thoughts on that?
Well, would you like to hear the irony of having a wide open route and what I've done professionally for the last 20 years?
Sure.
I've worked in construction architecture. So you want to talk about high pressure deadlines and often contracts that if you don't make the deadline, there are liquidated damages associated to such dates.
Yeah.
So I've operated in this high pressure deadline environment for the last 20 plus years. And I'm not going to lie, Kathy, up until about 2020, I was the open route super slave in many, many ways. Knowingly, probably the last 3 or 4 years of that, just saying I can handle it, right? Ego mind. But I learned how to navigate pressure in that way. I learned how to manage my deadlines and approach them correctly. And like you say, I have nothing on the solar plex or the spleen. So those are the streams of awareness in what we talk about. They're a little different than the ones that run up the middle. Those are format energies, if you're familiar.
Yep.
I'm really attuned to people. When I walk into a room, I can often tell in aura which people are unstable or ready to blow. I used to be a bouncer at one point in my journey. I just have a knack for being able to sense that. I don't know if you understand much about tones and cognition. I have tone 6, so I'm touch cognition. That's the 6th tone. So it's really quite a unique thing. It also has an element of aura awareness associated with it, which is probably beyond the scope of this conversation. But I just feel things. I walk into an environment and I instantly have the energy and the sense of it with that open route, survival pressures or emotional pressures. But there's a polarity, Kathy. As not self, or before I was educated, when I was reactive, it made me an absolute emotional terrorist in some ways with the energy I could amplify as a reflector. Arguing with a reflector, it can be an exercise in futility, because we're going to take whatever the other person gives us, amplify that with passion and the not self, the unaligned energy, whatever it is, and just put it right back. We don't wear out. We burn up, but we don't wear out in that way. I have a lot of compassion for some of the arguments I've had throughout my life and the other.
What do you mean you don't burn up? You burn up, or you don't wear out, you burn up.
We have this capacity to just take it in and amplify, and it's hard on the body. I've had some really highly intense experiences in my life where I'm a left brain. You and I are opposites. I have a left mind and a right brain. So I'm here to have a very sharp mind, but not to think a whole lot. Right.
Right.
When that left brain of mine gets going and it gets stuck on a topic, oh my God, it feels like my mind is going to melt is the experience in my body. It's just so linear and logical and directed. And that's the last thing my rightness wants to deal with, is a bunch of thinking, and it wants to just let it go. Just, you know what I mean? Maybe
yeah. And I'm wondering, as you describe that the way you did, and you said mine's the opposite, that feels like, okay, so I don't have a sharp mind, but I think a lot. Is that what?
No. You're very peripheral in your rightness and creative, and you're less.
Right.
I love rightness. I've really, as aged,
but I have a very busy brain at the same time.
But it's wonderful in its own way. You see so differently than I do, and that's really the beauty of it. We can learn so much from just sharing out our authority. That's the point.
Right.
That's the point, is to share with other people. And I have 9 5 lines, so I love talking. Another 6 2 lines, so more natural projection, right?
Yeah.
That's what the point is. And I'd love to see everybody just get along. Gene keys, QHD, this, that, the other. So what?
Right. Okay, now this is so interesting to me, and I'm gonna go into what we talked about a little bit beforehand without getting into specifics, because there are times where you say some things in comments that feel really dismissive of other people's things. And I'm just wondering, because whenever I read something from a reflector and I feel a way, I think, what is that saying about me? Because because that whole idea that the reflector is reflecting back to us. And I'm like, is it how I'm reading it? Because sometimes I feel this real strong need to be like, hey, they're a good person, even if you don't agree with them. And the way it sounded like you're saying they're not, right? So,
Yeah, I had a very interesting conversation about that. I know the example you're talking about. And yeah, it comes down to me editorializing. I'm inserting my opinion into my responses.
right.
That's not a clean outer authority response. And you're 100% accurate to call me out on it. I call myself out on it. But I do not edit my words. I leave them there as a reminder to myself so that I learn. True. Very, very true. Editorializing for me has been a part of my work for quite some time.
Yeah.
So I have to credit my projector guide for that. And that's my friend, Mark. He's really opened a lot of doors. Yeah. In a lot of ways for me, to kind of clean up some of that stuff. And yeah, I can.
He's a beautiful human being. He was on the podcast and I really enjoyed our conversation.
He's a dear friend, and I have to credit and recognize him for a lot of the ahas I've had over the last few years. So, But he's right. I mean, editorializing and inserting my opinion doesn't matter. I wasn't asked, in that sense. So that's really, I appreciate you calling me out on that. It's really a place that I go, and I look back at those things and I go, man, I wish I didn't say that, but I did. I'm going to leave it there though. So. Is what it is. But to my point, you should never judge a reflector based on one thing.
Yeah, clearly.
Every day. My mind will change tomorrow. I'm not the same person as I was yesterday. I'll be a totally different person in 3 weeks. It's just really how it is.
And that's the product for people who don't understand, with your openness as a reflector and all those hanging gates, every time the transits shift, it can activate different centers and make you feel a whole different way. And so as you've navigated that, through your, how often do you really consciously say to yourself, okay, I need to wait and see how I feel about this later? Or is that?
That's a fantastic question. I have a body response for that. When there is a question that my form, that my being, knows strategy and authority, it's almost like my stomach drops a little bit. There's a gravity to the question. That's when I know to kind of take a step back and say, well, maybe I better wait on this one.
Yeah.
I mean, being a reflector, Kathy, I think it's quite a privilege. I mean, I like to use the language we get to.
Yeah.
We get to experience the energy of all the other types. Though we cannot attach to it. But what a gift to be what we are. And I see so many young reflectors come into the experience, and the first thing they see is you can't initiate. You have to wait 30 days to make a decision. And all of a sudden the mind goes, if I want to go to lunch, I have to ask and wait 30 days. How's this going to work? How can I make
right? Do I need an invitation to go to the bathroom?
No.
Projector? No. I'm just kidding, right? Yeah, it's silly.
Yeah, but people will take it to that extreme.
Right. Yeah.
No, it's really for things that are going to impact my aura.
Right.
So I'm bringing a person into my life, like a teacher. My friend Kathleen has a husband who's a reflector like me. She tells the story of she sent her husband was seeing a guitar teacher, and she did not like the enhancements to his personality that this guitar teacher was adding to her husband as a reflector. So he had to stop seeing this teacher because there was some type of conditioning happening to where it was altering his personality a little bit. And that is a thing for reflectors, for sure. Who we bring into our life is going to condition us on a very, very, very deep level. We hear Teflon on the aura, but we don't often talk about the other side of it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I keep thinking about the fact that, so I have a member in my one of my adult nephews, who doesn't believe in any of this sort of stuff, right? He has no use for astrology, anything, but I have run his chart and I see that he's a reflector. And it's really interesting to watch that play out in his life and see how he, one of the things Karen Parker teaches about reflectors is that it's easy to fall in love or get attached with the potential in someone. Like you can,
Absolutely right. It's
I can see that in him. And he's cross of Eden too. So, I can see where he just wants a better world. He's got his little farm that he's created with the goats and,
Well, I have an analogy that I like to share about the reflector aura that I think mechanically articulates how it functions for me in experience. If you were to take a piece of just plain wood and put a couple of drops of water on it, it seems to beat up right away, right?
Mm-hmm.
But over time, it starts to soak in a little bit more. So that's that first little bit of Teflon. And if you wipe that water off after, say, 15 or 20 minutes, you might have a little wet spot, but it's going to dry or decondition very quickly. That's my experience.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, so like how that and speaks to why it's so important that the right people are in your life and you're in the right places to be around the right people, right? So
I'm sleeping with somebody, take that piece of wood, put it in a bucket of water and put a rock on top of it for 8 hours.
Right.
Take it out. How wet is that wood going to be? How much is that going to take in? Familiarity for a reflector can breed conditioning, sometimes very profound conditioning.
Yeah.
So these are experiments we have to run as reflectors to kind of see for ourselves. I have a shelf life. I have such compassion for you projectors. I really do. The openness that you have to the other when you're out in public, I can't even imagine what that's like for you guys sometimes. I walk into a space and nothing sticks to me. But after about an hour and a half, I really have to tell you that the fatigue starts to set in from sitting in maybe an unhealthy penta. And I've got to get out of there, Kathy. I don't know if you feel that at all as a projector, as open as you are.
I'm such an unusual projector in the fact that I'm only open in the sacral in my body and then the head and the ajna. So I don't feel it in the same way a lot of people do. I'm triple split, so I like the different vibes I get where it connects up in this way. So I really love being in the public aura, and I often don't know when enough is enough and when to leave it. So what?
Me too.
Yeah. So that's the thing for me. But so that it's man, I could talk. This is so interesting. And so what are you doing? Like, how can people work with you or connect with you if they want to? Are you taking on?
Absolutely. I love doing readings for reflectors, and I really love connecting them to their lunar cycle, giving them practical things to hold on to. I have four points of stability that reflectors do inherently have on the surface: profile, mindset, lunar cycle, and I may get into personality transference depending upon the person. It might be a little too much to get in there, if you know what I mean. But those are really things that we can grab onto and have as points of consistency. They are there.
Yeah.
It just look a lot different than everybody else. And,
so what's the best way for people to connect with you if they are interested in that?
My Facebook profile, I have a Buy Me a Coffee page, and I'm starting to migrate all of my stuff there. All of the, we didn't even talk about my human design graphics at all. I do a lot of graphics, and I give away a lot of freedom.
Oh, yeah.
I have a rave mandala on that page, which has layers and layers of information.
And that's through Facebook, or is there a direct URL to that?
It's on my Facebook profile as a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page. And it's also on my Reflector page that I have. I have an account called Quantum Reflections that I post with.
Okay.
It's almost exclusively Reflector material. And that link is also there.
Okay. So if someone doesn't have, because in the podcast, some of those people might not have, obviously the people who are listening now in the group would know how to do that way. But if someone wanted to connect and they're not on Facebook, do you have a direct link, or is that kind of just...
Buy Me a Coffee? Yes. It's under Buy Me a Coffee. It's Quantum Reflections is the name.
Okay. Awesome. That's great. Okay, cool. We'll put that in the show notes as well. So every week we share stories of how my guests have come to understand themselves in a more loving and empowering way through the lens of human design. How you think and speak about yourself matters. Human design can show you the reframe of not only your own story, but the story you tell yourself about your relationships. If you're ready to start living a better story, I'd love to help guide you through the process of fully embodying who you came here to be. I also invite you to check out my website at kathybashanko.com, where you can run your free human design chart and find all the ways to connect with me directly. Don't forget to follow Real Human Design Stories on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms. And please take a moment and give me a 5-star review, especially on Apple Podcasts. It really makes a difference in how they show that to people. So thanks so much, Roger. I've really found this to be a very enlightening and open conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
I did too. I love talking. So thank you. I'm honored to join your podcast, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Oh, you are most welcome. And, I love talking. I'm Chatty Cathy, right? So peace out, everybody.